A beggar woman fixed the bicycle of a crying boy without knowing he was the son of a millionaire who was watching her. "Don't cry, little one. I'm going to fix that bike even if it's the last thing I do," said Carmen, kneeling beside the boy, with a scraped face, ignoring that her own hands were dirty and that her beige dress, once elegant, was now stained with mud. The boy, with dried blood on his cheek, looked at her with distrust, but stopped crying. "My dad says I shouldn't talk to strangers," he murmured, wiping his tears with the sleeve of his black coat. "Your dad is very smart," Carmen replied while examining the loose chain of the bicycle. "But sometimes even strangers can help you, when you fall." A few meters away, a man in a dark suit watched the scene with a furrowed brow, hands in the pockets of his coat. He had been distracted with a business call when he heard his sons crying. "What's your name?" asked Carmen, beginning to manipulate the chain with surprising skill. "Mateo. And yours?" "Carmen. You know, I also had a bike like this when I was a girl." "But you're all dirty," said Mateo with the cruel frankness of children. "Where's your bike now?" Carmen smiled sadly while her fingers worked deftly on the bent wheel. "Sometimes life takes things away from you, Mateo. But the important thing is that when someone falls, you help them get back up, just like I'm doing with you right now." Gabriel, Mateo's father, took a step forward, unsure if he should intervene. At that moment, he heard something that left him paralyzed. "My mom died 2 years ago," said Mateo suddenly. "We lived in a nice building, but now I don't like it because she's not there anymore." Carmen's eyes widened. "A building with columns and a fountain at the entrance in Polanco?" "Yes, how do you know?" "Because I designed it," whispered Carmen, stopping her hands for a moment. "I was an architect before I lost everything." Gabriel held his breath. He recognized the name. Carmen Suarez, the brilliant architect whose design had won the contest for the most iconic building of his company, Izquierdo Construcciones. The woman who had disappeared from the professional world years ago and was now here, on the street, fixing his son's bicycle. Carmen adjusted and straightened the wheel. With a smile, she stood up and handed the bicycle to Mateo. "There you go, kid. Good as new." "That's awesome!" exclaimed Mateo, surprised. "Thank you." It was then that Gabriel decided to approach, an idea forming in his mind. This woman had created beauty from nothing. Perhaps she could do it again. "Miss Suarez," Gabriel approached with calculated steps while Carmen wiped her hands on her already stained dress. Carmen looked up, surprised. Her eyes showed a flash of recognition, but she quickly hid it. "Do we know each other?" she asked cautiously. "Not directly," replied Gabriel. "I'm Gabriel Izquierdo, Mateo's father and owner of Izquierdo Construcciones." Carmen visibly tensed. Her hands, previously steady while repairing the bicycle, now trembled slightly. "I see," she said with a controlled voice. "Well, your son's bike is fixed, if you'll excuse me." "Wait," Gabriel gently stopped her by the arm. "I have a proposal for you." "Dad, is Miss Carmen coming with us?" interrupted Mateo, who was already riding his bicycle again. Gabriel looked at his son and then at Carmen. In his eyes, there was a mix of compassion and something else. Perhaps opportunity. "I need someone to take care of Mateo. Someone I can trust. And from what I just saw, you have a gift with children. And with bicycles." Carmen let out a bitter laugh. "You're offering me a job as a nanny? To me, the architect who designed your most important building?" "I'm offering you a fresh start," corrected Gabriel. "Housing, food, a decent salary. And maybe, in time." "In time what?" "In time, we could talk about other professional arrangements." Carmen looked at Mateo, who was riding circles with his bicycle, seemingly oblivious to the conversation but clearly happier than when she found him crying. "Why me? There are thousands of qualified nannies in the city." "Because my son hasn't smiled like that in 2 years," Gabriel replied sincerely. "And because I recognize talent when I see it, whether in an architectural blueprint or fixing a bicycle." 3 hours later, Carmen stood in front of a mansion in Las Lomas. The driver Gabriel had sent for her waited patiently while she contemplated the imposing structure. She carried a small backpack with her few belongings. "Are you going in, miss?" asked the driver kindly. Carmen took a deep breath and nodded. She had nothing to lose, or perhaps she had already lost everything. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing an older woman with a stern expression and rigid posture. "You must be the new nanny," she said with a critical tone, examining her from head to toe. "I'm Doña Esperanza, the housekeeper." "Carmen Suarez," she introduced herself, extending a hand that Doña Esperanza deliberately ignored. "The master informed me about your situation," the woman continued. "I've prepared a room for you, and there are clean clothes waiting. I suggest you bathe before approaching the boy." Carmen pressed her lips together, holding back a sharp retort. This was what she had accepted, wasn't it? A new form of humiliation. "Carmen!" Mateo's enthusiastic voice broke the tension as he came running down the hallway. "You came! Come see my car collection!" Doña Esperanza frowned at the familiarity, but Mateo was already pulling Carmen by the sleeve of her worn sweater. "She must clean up first, young Mateo," intervened Doña Esperanza. "It's fine. She's with me," replied Mateo with the innocent authority of a rich child. "My dad said Carmen is special." That night, after a bath that seemed to wash away years of street life, Carmen found herself in a room larger than the last apartment she had lived in. The clothes left for her were simple but high quality. As she brushed her now clean and shiny blonde hair, she contemplated her reflection in the mirror. Who was this woman? The talented architect? The beggar who fixed bicycles? Or this strange, new intermediate version? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said. Gabriel entered cautiously, as if invading foreign territory. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," he explained, staying near the door. "It's more comfort than I've had in a long time," Carmen replied sincerely. "Mateo hasn't stopped talking about you. It seems you've made a lasting impression." Carmen smiled faintly. "He's a good kid. You must be proud." "I am," affirmed Gabriel, then added, "I reviewed your career. You were brilliant." "I was," agreed Carmen, emphasizing the past tense. "What happened?" Carmen looked away. "Life happened, Mr. Izquierdo. My brother got cancer. I abandoned everything to care for him. Then came the economic crisis, then a bad investment, or rather, a scam. And suddenly, there's no safety net to hold you." Gabriel nodded, processing the information. "Call me Gabriel, please." An awkward silence fell between them. "Why did you really bring me here?" Carmen finally asked. "And don't tell me it's just for Mateo." Gabriel looked at her directly. "Because I recognize wasted talent when I see it, and because maybe we can help each other." Before Carmen could respond, Mateo appeared at the door, already in pajamas. "Will you tell me a story, Carmen?" he asked with pleading eyes. "Dad's always too busy." Gabriel had the decency to look embarrassed. Carmen looked between father and son, noticing the invisible gap that separated them. "Sure, kid," she replied with a smile, using the affectionate term she had used before. "But first, what if we invite your dad to listen too?" Mateo looked at his father with cautious hope. "Can you, Dad? Please?" Gabriel looked at his watch, then at his son, and finally at Carmen, who watched him with a silent challenge in her eyes. "Of course," he replied, loosening his tie. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." And so began Carmen's first night under the Izquierdo roof, with a story about a boy, a magical bicycle, and the adventures that awaited him. What none of them knew was that their own story was just beginning to be written. 3 weeks had passed since Carmen crossed the threshold of the Izquierdo mansion. The routine had settled in with surprising ease. Breakfasts with Mateo while Gabriel reviewed documents, afternoons of homework and games, and occasional dinners where the father joined them when his commitments allowed. This afternoon, Carmen and Mateo were in the backyard. She had improvised a small architecture workshop using cardboard boxes, popsicle sticks, and modeling clay. "Is this how you lived before?" asked Mateo, while attempting to build a tower, making pretend houses. Carmen smiled, helping him stabilize the structure. "Not exactly. I drew blueprints, designs that later became real buildings, like where you lived with your mom. I miss her a lot," said Mateo, letting the tower collapse. "Sometimes, when Dad thinks I'm asleep, I hear him talking alone. Like she's still there. Carmen felt a lump in her throat. Love doesn't disappear, Mateo. It just changes shape, like your life. The boy observed her with that insight that sometimes surprised Carmen. You were an architect, and now you're my nanny. I guess so, she conceded, thoughtful. But you know what? Sometimes the best designs come after a demolition. From the window of his office, Gabriel watched the scene. Carmen had transformed his son in just a few weeks. The reserved, sad boy now laughed, asked questions. He had even started riding his bicycle again with enthusiasm. Gabriel found himself smiling involuntarily, something he rarely did since Laura's death. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Ricardo Valencia, his business partner since university, entered with a confident stride. Tall, with perfectly styled hair and an impeccable suit, Ricardo projected an image of absolute success. Gabriel, he greeted with excessive enthusiasm. I come with the documents for the Reforma project. We need your signature to start demolitions. Next week. Gabriel nodded, taking the folder Ricardo handed him. While reviewing the papers, Ricardo approached the window. Well, is that the famous nanny you told me about? You didn't mention she was so interesting. The tone in Ricardo's voice made Gabriel look up. She's good with Mateo. And quite attractive for a… What did you say? Former architect fallen on hard times. Ricardo adjusted his tie. I think I'll visit more often, compadre. Gabriel felt a pang of irritation he couldn't explain. Focus on the project, Ricardo. The demolitions in the historic district are causing protests. Pure sentimental nonsense, dismissed Ricardo. That land is worth millions, and those old buildings are just obstacles. Your father would have understood perfectly. Gabriel frowned at the mention of his father. Francisco Izquierdo had built the real estate empire with an iron hand, unconcerned with cultural heritage or the social consequences of his projects. Gabriel had tried to balance his father's legacy with a more humane vision, but Ricardo constantly pushed him toward the hard line of business. I'll sign after reviewing the details, said Gabriel, closing the folder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I promised Mateo we'd have dinner together. Ricardo smiled maliciously. Sure it's just for Mateo? He insinuated, looking toward the garden. Again. I wouldn't blame you, brother. Loneliness can be tough after so long. Gabriel shot him a glare. It's not what you think, Ricardo. As you say, Ricardo shrugged but added, I wouldn't mind getting to know her better. Maybe I'll ask her out. She works for me, Gabriel replied with more sharpness than intended. How territorial you've become, laughed Ricardo, heading to the door. You need to relax, Gabriel. It was just a joke. See you tomorrow at the board meeting. When Ricardo left, Gabriel returned to the window. Carmen was now helping Mateo ride his bicycle around the garden. The boy had been afraid to get back on after the accident, but there he was, pedaling with Carmen running alongside, lightly holding him. You're doing it, Mateo! You can almost go on your own! He heard her encourage the boy. Look, Dad! Shouted Mateo, noticing his father at the window. I'm riding again! Gabriel raised his hand in approval. His eyes briefly met Carmen's. She smiled at him, a genuine smile that caught him off guard. It was the first time he had seen her smile like that. That night, after putting Mateo to bed, Carmen was heading to her room when she found Gabriel in the living room, looking at old photographs. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, she said, ready to leave. No, please stay, Gabriel requested, closing the album. I want to thank you for what you did today with the bicycle. It was nothing, replied Carmen, approaching cautiously. Sometimes fear is harder to fix than a loose chain. Gabriel nodded, offering her a seat across from him. Laura, my wife, died in a car accident, he said suddenly. I was on a business call when it happened. I was always on a business call. Carmen remained silent, respecting the unexpected confession. Mateo was with her, Gabriel continued. He came out physically unharmed, but something broke in him that day, and I haven't known how to fix it. Some things can't be fixed, Gabriel, Carmen replied softly. They can only be rebuilt differently. Gabriel looked at her with intensity. Like you? Like all of us, she corrected. A comfortable silence settled between them until Gabriel asked, What happened with your brother? Carmen sighed. He passed away 3 years ago. I fought to keep him alive with the best treatments. I sold everything, mortgaged my future, and in the end, it wasn't enough. I'm sorry. I am too, but I don't regret it. I'd give everything again for him. I understand that feeling, confessed Gabriel. For Mateo, I'd do anything, except be present. Carmen pointed out, immediately regretting her boldness. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, you're right, admitted Gabriel, surprising her. I hide in work. It's easier to build buildings than face the void Laura left. Carmen stood and approached the window. You know what's most ironic? I designed that building, the one in Polanco, thinking of spaces that would bring families together. And now? Now I live in a mansion designed to keep people apart. She smiled sadly. So many rooms, so many spaces, and so little connection. Gabriel had never thought of his home that way. He observed her as she contemplated the night through the window, her profile illuminated by the dim light of the lamp. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something stirring within him. Something uncomfortable, yet comforting. Carmen, he said softly. Thank you. For what? For making Mateo ride his bicycle again. What Gabriel didn't say, what he was only beginning to understand, was that Carmen wasn't just helping his son overcome his fears. She was awakening parts of him he thought had died with Laura, and that both terrified and fascinated him in equal measure. The main hall of the Izquierdo mansion glowed with lights and animated conversations. Executives, politicians, and prominent figures from the real estate world mingled with champagne glasses, celebrating the anniversary of Izquierdo Construcciones. In a corner, far from the bustle, Carmen observed the scene uncomfortably. The navy blue dress Doña Esperanza had insisted she wear. You can't show up dressed like the help girl. Fit her surprisingly well, but felt like a costume. That color suits you, said Doña Esperanza, appearing beside her with a tray of canapés. You almost look like the architect you used to be. Carmen looked at her, surprised. It was the first time the housekeeper had spoken to her with anything resembling kindness. Thank you, though I'm not sure I belong here. Nonsense, replied the older woman. I've seen how Mr. Gabriel looks at you when he thinks no one notices. Excuse me? Doña Esperanza smiled enigmatically. I've known that man since he was a boy. I haven't seen him this alive since Mrs. Laura was with us. Before Carmen could respond, Mateo appeared among the elegant crowd, in his little suit but clearly bored. Carmen, can we leave already? Dad's parties are super boring. Your father wanted you to be here, Mateo, Carmen explained. It's important. To him. But he's barely talked to me all night, the boy protested. He's too busy with those men in suits. Carmen looked toward where Gabriel was conversing with a group of investors, Ricardo Valencia among them. As if sensing her gaze, Gabriel looked up and smiled briefly at them before returning to his conversation. I have an idea, Carmen whispered to Mateo. We stick it out for another half hour, and then I'll read you 2 stories instead of 1, before bed. 3, negotiated Mateo. 2.5, countered Carmen, eliciting a giggle from the boy. Miss Suarez, Ricardo's voice interrupted their little negotiation. At last, I have the pleasure of meeting you formally. Carmen shook his hand cautiously. There was something about this man that felt vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Mr. Valencia. Please, Ricardo, he insisted, holding her hand longer than necessary. Gabriel has told me so much about you, the prodigy architect now taking care of his son. Fascinating career change. The condescending tone didn't go unnoticed by Carmen, who withdrew her hand politely but firmly. Life takes unexpected turns, she replied with dignity. Indeed, Ricardo leaned in slightly. Though I wonder, don't you miss the world of architecture? I understand you were brilliant. Mateo is a far more important project than any building, Carmen responded, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. How touching! Ricardo smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Surely a mind like yours is still interested in big projects like our development in the historic district, a complete urban renewal. Something in Ricardo's words set off an alarm in Carmen. Urban renewal in the historic district? Oh, Gabriel hasn't told you? Ricardo seemed to enjoy her expression. The most ambitious project of Izquierdo Construcciones to date. We start demolitions next week. Which area exactly? The entire quadrant between Massones and Regina, old buildings with no real value. We'll replace them with an ultramodern complex. Carmen paled. That was precisely the area where she had lived with her brother, where she held her last memories of a dignified life. Those buildings have historical and cultural value, she objected, momentarily forgetting her position. Some date back to the 17th century. Ricardo waved a hand dismissively. Sentimentalism. Progress requires sacrifices. True progress preserves identity while building the future, Carmen retorted, her voice drawing the attention of nearby guests. Interesting perspective, intervened Gabriel, who had approached unnoticed, for someone who's no longer an architect. The comment, delivered lightly as a joke to the onlookers, hit Carmen like a slap. Excuse me, she said, attempting to leave. Mateo should go to bed. Wait, Gabriel gently stopped her. There's something I want to announce, and I'd like you to be here. Gabriel moved to the center of the hall and lightly tapped his glass to get attention. The murmur of conversations gradually ceased. Friends and colleagues, he began, I thank you for your presence at this very special anniversary. Today, we not only celebrate the past of Izquierdo Construcciones, but also its future. I am pleased to officially announce the start of our most ambitious project, the renewal of the Regina Massones quadrant in the historic district. Enthusiastic applause interrupted his words. Carmen stood motionless, with Mateo clinging to her hand, feeling the ground open beneath her feet. The final plans have been approved, Gabriel continued, and demolitions will begin next week. I invite you to see the model we've prepared especially for this occasion. An assistant unveiled a large model in the center of the hall. Carmen approached as if in a trance, immediately recognizing the area. There, marked in red for demolition, was the small Art Deco building where she had lived with her brother during his illness. They can't do this, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Excuse me? Asked Gabriel, frowning. Carmen looked up, meeting Gabriel's gaze. I said they can't do this, she repeated with more firmness. Those buildings are cultural heritage. There are families who have lived there for generations. An uncomfortable silence fell over the guests. Ricardo smiled subtly, as if enjoying the spectacle. Carmen, can we discuss this in private? Gabriel suggested in a low voice. Why? She asked, her voice trembling with contained emotion. So you can explain how your vision of progress justifies destroying the home where I cared for my dying brother, the last place where I was happy? Gabriel paled. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the building at Massones 25, Carmen pointed to the exact spot on the model. Where I lived until I lost everything, where I cared for my brother with terminal cancer while you planned to turn it into rubble. The guests began to murmur. Ricardo stepped forward. Miss, I think you're confusing the personal with business. Perhaps you should retire. Carmen looked at him steadily, and suddenly she recognized him. You, she said with sudden clarity. Ricardo Valencia, the financial advisor who convinced me to invest my brother's last savings in that phantom fund. Ricardo's face hardened, but he maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Carmen Suarez, she said, standing tall. Architect, the same one who designed the Polanco building for Izquierdo Construcciones. The same one you swindled 3 years ago, leaving me with nothing for my brother's treatments. A murmur of astonishment ran through the room. Gabriel looked between Carmen and Ricardo, confusion giving way to understanding. You're that Carmen Suarez? Gabriel asked, as if seeing her for the first time. The very same, she confirmed with a dignity that contrasted with the tears beginning to form in her eyes. The one who designed spaces to unite families while her own fell apart. The one who believed in architecture as a way to improve lives, not destroy them. Without waiting for a response, Carmen took Mateo by the hand. Let's go, kid. It's time to leave. But Carmen, the boy protested, confused by the situation. Carmen, wait. Gabriel tried to stop her. I didn't know. That's the problem, isn't it? She replied with sadness. You never know. You never see what you destroy." And with those words, Carmen left the hall, leaving behind a stunned silence and a completely disconcerted Gabriel. Outside, the rain had begun to fall as if the sky itself wanted to cleanse the freshly opened wounds. Doña Esperanza approached Mateo silently, who was looking toward the door through which Carmen had left. "Come, child," she said softly. "I'll take you to your room." "But Carmen promised to read me stories," Mateo protested, tears in his eyes. "Tonight, you'll have to settle for me," replied the old woman, casting an accusing look at Gabriel before taking the boy away. In the middle of the hall, surrounded by guests pretending not to have witnessed the incident, Gabriel found himself alone, staring at the model of the project that now, somehow, seemed less impressive and more destructive than he had ever noticed. The rain fell relentlessly over Mexico City. Carmen walked aimlessly, soaked to the bone. Her elegant blue dress, now clinging to her body like a second skin, had been drenched for hours as she processed the betrayal, the pain, the humiliation. Not because Gabriel didn't know who she was, that she could understand, but because he was about to demolish the last tangible piece of her history. She stopped under the awning of a small closed shop. Across from her, the historic district slept, unaware of the sentence hanging over its centuries-old roofs. Carmen observed the ancient buildings, the facades that had survived earthquakes, revolutions, the relentless passage of time. Soon, many of them would be mere memories, unless... An idea began to form in her mind. She pulled a small notebook from her soaked bag. Her architect's habit of always carrying one had never left her, and she began to write frantically, shielding the pages from the rain. If she couldn't stop the demolition from within, perhaps she could do it from outside. In the Izquierdo mansion, Gabriel hadn't slept. He obsessively reviewed the project files, contracts, impact studies, looking for something he hadn't seen before. At dawn, when Doña Esperanza entered with coffee, he barely noticed her presence. "She hasn't returned," the woman informed him without being asked. Gabriel nodded distractedly. "The boy asked for her all night," Doña Esperanza continued. "He cried until he fell asleep." This time Gabriel looked up. "I know, I heard him. And you did nothing?" "What could I do, Esperanza? She left." The old woman placed the cup forcefully on the desk, spilling some coffee. "Go look for her, of course, like a real man would have done." Gabriel looked at her, surprised. In 30 years, Doña Esperanza had never spoken to him like this. "I don't know where she is," he replied, aware of how weak his excuse sounded. "On the streets, in the rain, without money or a place to go." Doña Esperanza shook her head in disgust. "The same situation you found her in, only now with a more broken heart." "It wasn't my intention." "Your intentions don't matter, sir. Your actions do." The woman headed to the door. "I'll prepare breakfast for Mateo. He, at least, deserves some normalcy." When the door closed, Gabriel buried his face in his hands. How had it come to this? He reviewed the project documents again and stopped at a name. Ricardo Valencia. Carmen's words echoed in his mind. "The financial advisor who convinced me to invest my brother's last savings." He picked up the phone and dialed. "I need all the information on Carmen Suarez and any investments managed by Ricardo Valencia in the last 5 years. Yes, it's urgent." A week later, the historic district buzzed with unusual activity. Banners and posters appeared on facades and lampposts. "Save our heritage. No to demolition. History is not torn down." Carmen, in borrowed clothes and with renewed energy, organized neighbors in the central plaza. "We can't let them destroy our roots," she explained to a group of residents. "These buildings aren't just stone and cement. They're our collective memory." "But what can we do against such a powerful company?" asked an elderly woman, her face marked by decades of life in the neighborhood. "Resist together," Carmen replied, "and show them there's another way to progress. One that doesn't require crushing the past." Carmen spread out plans on an improvised table. For days, she had worked on an alternative project, a renovation that preserved the historic facades while modernizing the interiors, creating functional spaces without destroying the neighborhood's essence. "This is what we could have," she explained, pointing to her designs. A living neighborhood that honors its history while embracing the future. The neighbors gathered, intrigued. Soon, local journalists began covering the story. The homeless ex-architect challenging one of the country's most powerful construction companies. In his office, Gabriel watched the news on his computer. The image of Carmen leading a peaceful protest in front of City Hall left him paralyzed. She looked different. Strong, determined, passionate. This was the woman who had designed the Polanco building, not the submissive nanny who had lived in his house. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a thick folder. "Sir, here's the investigation you requested." Gabriel took the folder and began reviewing it. With each page, his expression hardened. The evidence was conclusive. Ricardo had orchestrated an elaborate scam that had left Carmen and other investors in ruin. More alarmingly, he had used Izquierdo Construcciones' connections to lend legitimacy to his scheme. Another knock on the door. This time, it was Doña Esperanza. "With your permission, sir," she said, placing something on his desk. "I found this while cleaning Miss Carmen's room." It was a worn notebook. Gabriel opened it cautiously and found pages filled with designs, sketches of the historic district project, but reimagined. It wasn't a demolition, but a revitalization. The concept was brilliant. Preserve the valuable, renovate the necessary, add modern elements that complemented rather than destroyed. "I also found this," Doña Esperanza added, handing him an envelope. Inside were drawings made by Mateo, him, his father, and Carmen together in a park. A family. On the back, in childish handwriting, "I love you so much, Carmen. Please come back." Gabriel felt something break inside him. "How is Mateo?" "Sad, confused. He asks for her constantly." Gabriel nodded, making a decision. "Please tell Raúl to prepare the car. You're going to look for her. I'm going to do what I should have done from the start. Listen." Carmen was in the middle of an interview with a local channel when she noticed the black car parking nearby. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Gabriel stepping out, dressed casually instead of his usual suit. "And so, with citizen participation, we can create a project that benefits everyone," she continued, trying to maintain her composure, as Gabriel approached. When the interview ended, Gabriel was waiting a few meters away. Carmen approached cautiously. "Did you come to serve an eviction notice?" she asked with defensive irony. "I came to listen," he replied simply, "and to ask for your forgiveness." Carmen hadn't expected that. She crossed her arms, protecting her heart. "Why now?" "Because you were right." Gabriel pulled the notebook from his pocket. "About the neighborhood. About Ricardo. About the project. I found proof of the scam." Carmen took the notebook, her fingers briefly brushing Gabriel's. "I wasn't seeking revenge," she said softly. "I just wanted to save what's left." "I know." Gabriel looked around at the neighbors, watching curiously. "I saw your designs. They're extraordinary." An awkward silence fell between them. "Mateo misses you," Gabriel said finally. "So do I." Carmen looked away. "I've started something here. I can't just abandon it." "I'm not asking you to," Gabriel replied. "I'm asking you to lead it, officially." Carmen looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I want you to redesign the project," Gabriel explained, "as the lead architect of Izquierdo Construcciones. A renovation, not a demolition." Carmen's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious." Gabriel extended a hand. "What do you say? Partners?" Carmen looked at the outstretched hand, thoughtful. "And Ricardo? He's no longer with us. In fact, he'll face fraud charges." Carmen nodded slowly. "I'd need guarantees that the neighbors will be included in the process." "Of course. And complete creative freedom." "I wouldn't expect less." Carmen finally gave a small smile. "And Mateo?" Gabriel's expression softened. "He's been drawing you every day. He says the house doesn't feel like home without you." Carmen felt tears forming in her eyes. "I don't feel at home without him either," she admitted. A childish voice interrupted the moment. "Carmen, They both turned to see Mateo running toward them from the car, followed by Doña Esperanza trying to keep up. "Mateo!" Carmen knelt, receiving the boy in a tight hug. "Look at you, kid. How are you?" "I missed you so much," exclaimed Mateo, clinging to her. "Why did you leave? Don't you love us anymore?" "Of course I love you, my boy," Carmen replied, wiping away a tear. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, but that doesn't mean we stop loving." Mateo looked at his father with a serious expression. "Dad promised he'd apologize and bring you back. Did he apologize?" Gabriel smiled, embarrassed. "Yes, I did." "And are you coming back with us?" Mateo asked Carmen with pleading eyes. Carmen looked at Gabriel, who waited silently for her response. "Yes," she said finally, "but with one condition." "What?" asked father and son in unison. "That you let me redesign not only this neighborhood," she gestured around, "but also how we are as a family." Gabriel looked at her with intensity, understanding the deeper meaning of her words. "That sounds like a perfect project," he replied softly. Mateo, not fully grasping the exchange between the adults but happy with the outcome, jumped for joy. "That's awesome. Carmen's coming home." As the three walked toward the car, followed by a smiling Doña Esperanza, the neighborhood residents applauded spontaneously. They didn't understand all the details, but they recognized the start of something important. The reconstruction not only of a neighborhood, but of three broken hearts that together could form something new and beautiful. A warm November sun illuminated the streets of the historic district, where scaffolding and construction activity had replaced protest banners. Carmen, with a hard hat and plans under her arm, supervised the restoration of the building at Masoni's 25. "The original arch turned out perfect," she commented to one of the master masons. "It's just as I remembered it from when I lived here, with my brother." "It was tough, architect, but worth it," the man replied with pride. "These buildings have soul." Carmen smiled, watching the Art Deco facade regain its original splendor, while the interiors were adapted to house a community cultural center. 6 months had passed since her return to the Izquierdo mansion, no longer as a nanny, but as the director of the urban revitalization project. Her phone vibrated. A message from Gabriel. "Mateo refuses to wear the tie for the presentation. Says he'll only listen to you." Carmen replied quickly. "Tell him if he wears the tie, we'll buy that chemistry set he wants so badly." 3 dots appeared immediately, followed by, "It worked. Your magic with him. We'll wait for you at City Hall at 5. Carmen pocketed the phone with a smile. Her relationship with Gabriel had evolved slowly over these months, from professional partners to close friends, and lately, something deeper that neither had yet put into words. "Architect," one of the workers called. "We found something strange on the roof of the main building." Carmen followed, intrigued. Upon reaching the terrace of the old apartment building where she had lived with her brother, she noticed the workers had uncovered a hidden structure after years of neglect. A small, almost invisible sealed door in the wall. "I never saw this," she murmured, examining the curious design in the stone surrounding the entrance. "And I spent years in this building." "Should we open it?" asked the foreman. Carmen hesitated for a moment. "Let's finish today's scheduled work first. I'll investigate this personally later." As she descended the stairs, an idea began to form in her mind. She vaguely recalled including a special space in the original plans for the Polanco building. A surprise architectural feature she had never mentioned to the clients. Could it be possible? At City Hall, Gabriel nervously adjusted his tie while waiting with Mateo. The boy, now almost 9, had grown several centimeters and showed a confidence that would have been unthinkable months ago. "Where's Carmen?" Mateo asked for the third time. "She'll be here," Gabriel assured. "She's never let us down, has she?" Mateo shook his head. "Dad, why don't you ask Carmen to be your girlfriend?" Gabriel nearly choked on his own saliva. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you look at her the way Miguel's dad looks at his new wife," Mateo replied with a child's devastating frankness. "And you're happier when she's around. So am I." Gabriel knelt in front of his son. "Would you like Carmen to be more than our friend?" "Duh!" exclaimed Mateo. "She's already like family. You guys just need to figure it out." A soft laugh interrupted the conversation. Carmen had arrived, elegant in a cream-colored pantsuit, her plans under her arm and an amused expression on her face. "Figure what out?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Matteo opened his mouth, but Gabriel gently stopped him. "That it's time to go in," he improvised, winking at his son. "The presentation's about to start." The City Hall auditorium was packed. Officials, neighborhood residents, journalists, and business people had gathered for the official presentation of the revitalization project. In the front row, Doña Esperanza sat proudly, like a grandmother at a school play. When Carmen took the stage alongside Gabriel, an expectant silence filled the room. For months, the collaboration between the disgraced architect and the powerful businessman had been the subject of speculation in the city's social and professional circles. "Good evening, everyone," Gabriel began. "Today, we present not just a real estate project, but a new vision for how to develop our city, respecting its history, honoring its people, and building a future that includes us all." The applause was warm but restrained. When Carmen took the microphone, her voice carried an emotion that moved even the most skeptical. "A little over 6 months ago, I stood in front of these same buildings in the rain, homeless and hopeless," she said. "Today, I'm here to show that there's always another chance, another possible design, another way to build." The presentation continued, with Matteo helping unveil the model of the redesigned project. Instead of glass skyscrapers, it showcased restored historic buildings with community spaces, small local businesses, and affordable housing. The crown jewel, the old Art Deco building transformed into a cultural center with space for local artists. When the formal presentation ended, attendees approached to examine the plans and ask questions. Carmen answered with passion and expertise, while Gabriel watched from a distance, admiring how she had reclaimed her professional confidence and brilliance. A woman approached Gabriel. "My family has lived in that building for 3 generations, she said, pointing to one of the plans. "I thought we'd have to leave. Thank you for listening." "Don't thank me," Gabriel replied sincerely. "It was Carmen who taught us to listen." As the crowd began to disperse, Carmen approached Gabriel and Matteo. "I have a surprise for you," she announced, her eyes sparkling. "But we need to go to the Polanco building now." "Now?" Gabriel asked, confused. "It has to be today," Carmen insisted. "Trust me." The sunset fell over Mexico City as Gabriel's car stopped in front of the elegant Polanco building, Carmen's first major project and where Gabriel had lived with Laura and Matteo. "We haven't come here since—" Gabriel left the sentence unfinished, but Carmen nodded, understanding. "I know. That's why it's important." They took the elevator to the top floor. Carmen led them to a service door that opened onto the rooftop. "When I designed this building, I included a secret element," she explained as they climbed the metal staircase. "Something that didn't appear in the official plans. An architectural surprise that would only be visible on certain dates of the year." Upon reaching the rooftop, Carmen guided them to what seemed like a plain wall. The setting sun cast its light at a specific angle, revealing a barely visible geometric pattern on the surface. "It's November 13th, said Carmen. "Do you know what day this is, Matteo?" The boy thought for a moment. "The day Mom died," he replied quietly. Gabriel looked at Carmen in surprise. "How did you know?" "I researched it when I was designing the building," she explained. "I wanted to create something special, something meaningful." Carmen pressed a specific sequence on the geometric pattern. With a soft click, a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden entrance. "What's this?" Gabriel asked, astonished. "A secret garden," Carmen replied, "designed to heal the heart." The three entered a surprising space. A small, circular garden protected by glass walls that allowed a view of the sky but shielded it from the wind. Plants and flowers grew in abundance, some even climbing the walls. In the center, a crystal-clear fountain murmured softly. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light. "It's beautiful," Gabriel murmured. "How is it possible we never knew about this?" "I designed it inspired by my brother," Carmen explained as Matteo explored the space in wonder. "During his illness, he always dreamed of a rooftop garden, a place to feel close to the sky but protected. The entrance only reveals itself when the sunset hits at that specific angle, And that only happens a few days a year. And how did you know today was one of those days? Gabriel asked. I calculated it when I designed the building. Today is one of them. Matteo called them from the center of the garden. Dad, Carmen, look at this. Next to the fountain was a small stone compartment. Inside, protected by a hermetic glass case, was a letter with Gabriel's name written in elegant calligraphy. It's Laura's handwriting, Gabriel said, his voice breaking with emotion. She found it, Carmen explained softly. When I showed her the finished building, I mentioned there was a secret. I was a young, enthusiastic architect. I wanted to impress. Laura promised she wouldn't tell anyone until she found it herself. With trembling hands, Gabriel opened the case and took out the letter. As he read silently, tears began to stream down his cheeks. Finally, he looked up at Carmen. She knew she was sick, he said, his voice breaking. She never told me. She didn't want to worry me. This letter is her goodbye, but also her wish for us, for Matteo and me. She says to find a way to be happy again. Carmen approached and took his hand. Laura found this place a few weeks before the accident. She wrote to tell me. She planned to show it to you, but... Gabriel looked at the garden, then at his son, and finally at Carmen. I don't believe in coincidences, he said. That you found Matteo that day in the park. That you were the architect of this building. That we're here now. There's a greater design in all this. Matteo approached and took both their hands. Are you going to ask Carmen to be your girlfriend? Now, Dad, he asked with childish impatience. Gabriel laughed through his tears, looking at Carmen with a silent question in his eyes. Maybe we should redesign our relationship, she suggested, smiling through her own tears. Like we did with the Historic District project, preserving the valuable, renewing the necessary. That's a yes, Matteo insisted. Carmen knelt in front of the boy. It means I want to be part of your family, kid, if you and your dad accept me. Matteo hugged her tightly. You're already part of our family, Carmen. You guys just needed to realize it. Gabriel joined the embrace, wrapping his arms around both. In that secret garden, bathed in the last rays of the sun, the three felt something complete. A cycle that began with a broken bicycle in the rain, now blooming in a secret garden above the city's rooftops. Thank you for fixing us, Carmen, Gabriel whispered in her ear. Not just Matteo's bicycle, but our hearts. Carmen smiled, remembering that rainy day that now seemed the start of a perfectly designed blueprint. Sometimes, she replied softly, we have to lose everything to find what we really need. And as the sun dipped behind the city's buildings, a gentle breeze stirred the flowers in the secret garden, as if someone, from somewhere far away, was giving their blessing to this rebuilt family. 5 years had passed since that afternoon in the secret garden. The historic district of Mexico City shone under the spring sun, its centuries-old buildings lovingly restored, coexisting harmoniously with discrete modern elements that had revitalized the area without destroying its essence. In the central plaza, where Carmen had once organized protests, an open-air exhibition was now being inaugurated. Architecture with Soul, the Renaissance of the historic district, showcasing before and after photos of the ambitious project that had transformed not only the urban space, but the construction philosophy of the entire city. Carmen Suarez de Izquierdo, elegant in a simple olive-green dress, walked through the exhibition surrounded by admirers, architecture students, and grateful neighbors. At 39, she had not only regained her professional prestige, but had become a reference for a new architectural movement prioritizing cultural preservation and social inclusion. My wife is too modest to say it, Gabriel commented to a group of international investors, but her vision has increased not only the cultural value but also the economic value of the entire area. Proof that doing the right thing can also be good business. A few meters away, Doña Esperanza, now director of the community center housed in the old Masones 25 building, guided a group of tourists. This building is special, she explained with pride. Our architect lived here when she was young. Then she went through hard times, even lived on the streets. And now, look at what she's created. Matteo, now a 14-year-old teenager, slipped away from the crowd and approached Carmen. "They're all impressed, but I'm bored," he confessed with a complicit smile. "Can we leave already? I have to finish my model for the school contest." Carmen affectionately ruffled his now darker, rebellious hair. 10 more minutes, kid. Your dad's closing that deal with the German investors for the foundation." "Always 10 more minutes," Matteo protested without real annoyance. "By the way, Lucia keeps asking when we're going home." At the mention of his 4-year-old younger sister, Matteo's face transformed. His adoration for the little girl was evident to everyone. "Your godmother's keeping her entertained," Carmen replied. "Doña Esperanza promised her cookies and stories, so we have some time." Gabriel joined them, slipping an arm around Carmen's waist. "Done. The Architects of Tomorrow Foundation will receive funding for the next 5 years. We can sponsor 50 more students from vulnerable communities." Carmen smiled, remembering her own past. 50 future architects who won't have to abandon their dreams due to financial hardship. A reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Architect Suarez, your story is fascinating, from rising star to homeless, then revolutionizing social architecture in Mexico. What was the hardest part of your journey?" Carmen glanced briefly at Gabriel and Matteo before answering. "Losing hope," she said sincerely. "When I fixed that crying boy's bicycle in the rain, I didn't know I was taking the first step to rebuild my own life." The reporter turned the microphone to Gabriel. "Mr. Izquierdo, how did your business vision change after meeting your now wife?" "I understood that true legacy isn't in how many buildings you construct," Gabriel replied, "but in how those buildings build community." Izquierdo and Suarez. Construcciones hasn't just grown economically. We've grown in purpose. When the interview ended, the family headed to their car, bidding farewell to the guests. "Let's stop by the secret garden before picking up Lucia," Gabriel suggested. "It's one of those special days when the light reveals the entrance." Matteo nodded enthusiastically. "I have to show you something there," he said mysteriously. The secret garden on the Polanco building's rooftop had flourished even more over the years. Carmen had refined the irrigation system and expanded the variety of plants, turning that hidden space into a true urban paradise. The family visited religiously, on every significant anniversary, the day they met, their wedding day, Laura's birthday. As Gabriel opened the secret entrance, following the ritual Carmen had designed years ago, Matteo pulled something from his backpack, a small but detailed model. Inside the garden, the teenager placed his creation on the central fountain. "It's my project for the national contest," he explained. "I call it Cycles." Carmen and Gabriel observed, amazed. The model depicted a circular plaza with different levels connected by ramps and stairs. At the center, a structure combining bicycle elements with architectural forms created a dynamic focal point. "It's inspired by our story," Matteo continued. "Each level represents a stage: pain, encounter, reconstruction, rebirth." Carmen knelt to examine the details. The designs showed clear influences from her own style, but with a freshness and originality all their own. "It's extraordinary, Matteo," she said with genuine admiration. "You have a natural gift." "Like his mother," Gabriel added, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Laura would be so proud." Matteo smiled with the same smile she had seen in him years ago, now tempered with the wisdom of experience. "I have the memories you've told me about her, Dad, and I have Carmen, who taught me to see beauty even in what's broken." Carmen hugged the teenager, remembering the scared boy with a scraped knee she had met years ago. "You know, when I found you with your broken bicycle, I never imagined you'd be designing plazas based on that experience." "Everything has a purpose," Matteo replied with a wisdom beyond his years. "As Grandpa Francisco says when he visits from Spain, even the hardest stones can become the foundation for something beautiful." Gabriel, who had approached Laura's letter, still kept in its glass case, smiled at his son's mention of his father. Reconciling with Francisco Izquierdo had been another miracle of these years, another circle closing. "We should go," Gabriel said, checking his watch. "Doña Esperanza will kill us if we're late for Lucia." As they left the secret garden, Carmen paused to contemplate the city stretching below. From that height, she could make out the restored historic district, The park where she had fixed Mateo's bicycle, even the area where she had once slept on the streets. Gabriel approached from behind, embracing her. "What are you thinking, architect?" "About the blueprints we can never draw," she replied, leaning against his chest. "The ones for our own lives. Those are written day by day," Gabriel philosophized, "with every decision, every encounter, like fixing a crying boy's bicycle or stopping to watch an extraordinary woman do something seemingly simple." Carmen turned in his arms to look into his eyes. "You know what's most surprising about all this?" "What?" "That the beggar and the millionaire turned out to be exactly what the other needed." Mateo called from the door, feigning adolescent exasperation at his parents' displays of affection. "Hey, lovebirds, Lucia's waiting, and I'm hungry." Gabriel and Carmen laughed, intertwining their hands as they followed Mateo. As they exited the building, a boy sped by on a bicycle, nearly losing balance on a sharp turn. Carmen instinctively stepped forward, ready to help if he fell, but the boy regained control and continued on his way. "Some things never change," Gabriel commented with a smile. "Thankfully," Carmen replied, "there will always be bicycles to fix, buildings to restore, and hearts to heal." And as the Izquierdo Suarez family walked away through the streets of a city they had helped transform, the setting sun cast their elongated shadows on the pavement. Three figures once broken, now united in a perfect design no architect could have planned.